You're listening to a Meatsmith Harvest. This is the podcast that encourages and equips you to grow your home around the harvest. Hello, Meatsmiths. Welcome to the 13th episode of A Meatsmith Harvest. This is exciting because we're beginning year 2 officially. We finished up year 1 with the last episode. We've got 12 full episodes, and now we're embarking on the second year of this podcast. So that's a milestone, I would say, especially for us and our family and our capabilities and non-capabilities. Hint, hint, wink, wink, Therese. Our baby's here with us again, this second podcast after her birth. And so we'll see if she has anything to contribute.
I'm sure she will.
Yeah. So anyway, thanks so much for being with us along this wonderful ride that we've began digital education about a year ago, launching our membership a little over a year ago, and with the podcast soon to follow. So it's been a year of just going, and putting one leg out in front of the other, hoping that something will land as we are walking and running this journey, which we have another big step that we're heading into that I wanted to bring up right away. And we are going full steam ahead, and we just talked to a filmmaker yesterday, and we're going to create a new schedule of film production, 1 or 2, we're looking at 2 films a week on our YouTube channel, just kind of marking your culinary adventures, actually our whole family's culinary adventures.
Which are the same as human adventures.
Yeah. It's not really about us per se. It's just kind of marking what it's like in one family's journey.
Yeah.
And knowing that you all will relate to these adventures. So
yeah, and culinary makes it sound kind of narrow, but it's only because there's not a broader word.
Yeah.
Than that.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. Culinary, I have to think about where that comes from. I wonder if it has anything to do with cull, which is where all the culinary stuff begins. With the kill. I don't know.
Yeah.
We'll have to look that up.
Yeah, we will.
OED.
Okay. Yeah, we're actually coming up with the names right now. We've been throwing a lot of words out at each other lately. What this new kind of show will be. But anyway, we'll get into all that later. But we're really excited to enter this next step with you all.
And the goal really is to put out a lot more free material, and to do a much more in-depth film production, or our members would know them as our harvest films, to really enhance those. Yeah. In quality and quantity. Because we happen to have an expert, a neighbor on Vashon, who we'll see how things progress, and maybe someday we'll get to introduce him. But he has the apparatus.
Oh yeah,
it's unbelievable.
He's filmed
the filmic apparatus. That
everyone
is
you
possible.
Can think of, and he happens to live on Vashon.
But we'll hold off for now. We'll get into that.
Yeah.
But all of that to say that the capacity to capture the details is hugely advanced with the various kinds of cameras that he has, and so we're really excited about focusing on those things.
Yeah, we've got our first production day. It's kind of a trial production day with him, early August. So we're hoping that with editing, after the fact, we can start getting this content out, no later than early September, and then but to that end, we are hiring. So we wanted to mention that too. We will need someone that can help us kind of blast all this content, because we can create it, but we can't really do all of the communicating of it. It's got to be, we're creating a team right now. So we wanted to mention it on our podcast in case any of you know any people that are gifted in the social media arts. Someone that really loves being social, and someone that loves or can find their passion in meatsmithing too. So keep that in mind. If you or if any of your friends have the education and the experience and they're just looking for the right fit, we're looking for the right fit right now. So you can email us at harvest@farmsidemeatsmith.com. And we actually haven't even posted it on any job sites or anything, because I just think the first best place to look is with you, our audience. I've heard of countless stories of other small businesses just finding people through their own audience. And so we're giving that a go.
We're also ramping up to do more podcasts, aren't we?
Yeah, that's part of it. Exactly. I just spoke with a professional podcaster who's also very passionate about our work. And he's coming in a week or two. He's going to help me edit this podcast. And we're hoping that relationship can be fruitful as well, so that we can bust out one a week.
Right.
It's something we have always wanted to do since the beginning, as you know. And we actually want to make that happen so that we can just get more content out there. And
because we can't actually record podcasts if we're spending a really long time editing them. Yeah. Which we inevitably are, because we're not professional podcast editors. And everything just takes that much longer.
Yeah. So someone that can help us just craft our story, pull in all the threads to build one tapestry on. We only have a few social media platforms: Instagram, Facebook, and our newsletter, and then a few side places. But anyway, keep that in mind. But we are asking you basically to help us fund this. I know we've mentioned it before, but we really, really mean it this time. Because we're doing it. We're doing it. And we want you to be along for the ride, because it's going to be fun. And one of the best ways to do that, actually there's two ways to do that. One is to become a patron. And we've talked about this before over at patreon.com/meatsmith. I just actually combed through that website this morning. I kind of tweaked it here and there, made it more updated, and it's a really snazzy website. Patreon does a great job making us look good. But see if you can pitch in a few dollars a month, whatever you've got. If you're enjoying this podcast, if maybe you're on the fence about whether or not you want to actually become a member, see if you can become a patron, and consider that as a way to give to this project. I think I know you won't be disappointed, but that would be a great step, just a couple bucks a month to get your feet wet, as it were.
Yeah, and those Patreon funds are specifically directed towards getting the help that we need.
Exactly.
So as we can create more podcasts.
Right. We actually have a goal there. We're very transparent about how much it will cost every month to hire this filmmaker, hire a podcaster, and hire a social media manager. So, and it's not that much when you compare what other companies are charging or paying for all these resources. So it's the most economic way possible, and I think it's just gonna deliver. So please consider becoming a patron, and you can even pause this episode right now and head on over to patreon.com/meatsmith and just look at the website. Actually, it's really pretty. Just look at it, give it a thought, and then maybe come back after the episode, or maybe talk about it with your family, see if you could really benefit in your home with the knowledge that we've been giving out. So patreon.com is the number one place to be like an official donor, I guess is the right word. And if you are sure that you want to take the next step into becoming just building your prowess with the Meatsmith knowledge, I would consider becoming a member. And we are kind of springing a membership sign up opening early August, or August 3rd through 12th. We weren't going to do it until September, but there's been a few things converging that makes it the right time. So as soon as this podcast publishes, I'm going to press the open button on our website. And if you've been waiting since, I think it was March or April was our last sign up period, please consider becoming a member. We've got a full year of content there now, and it just looks so fabulous. Like scrolling, and you're still getting videos and you're still getting articles, and it's stacked. It's so brimming right now. And in fact, I had to get a hold of my website developer to help her reorganize things because it's almost looking too long and too overwhelming, which is a good problem. So please consider becoming a member because there's a whole year's worth of content there now. There's a sign-up fee that is worth way more than what we're charging for. You get basically the year's worth of content, but you don't have to pay for that year's worth like our old members were, our original members were. So you pay a small sign-up fee and then a monthly fee, or you can pay for a year at a time, like a full year in advance, and you don't even have to pay for that previous year's worth of
content
value. Yeah. So those are the options. Whatever your budget can handle right now, we highly recommend becoming a yearly subscriber. And we've got some great content up there right now. I just posted our barbecuing a rabbit video, which was really good.
The outdoor cookery stuff. It being summer and all. It actually inspired me to make this podcast about open fire cooking. So we'll get into that content later. But those are the two big options. Do you have anything to add about that? Well, I know also we have one thing that we get a lot of questions about, but that it is for some reason tricky to organize a hands-on class around, is the harvesting of small ruminants, goats and sheep, and even venison, and deer. But I know that I just recorded a whole harvest film on the skinning of a sheep, the proper way to seam the hide off rather than to knife the whole thing off, which is a horribly toilsome job. But if you can get in the right seam and fist it off, it's magic. And then I think we already have a goat slaughter one up there, and even evisceration and skinning. So basically the whole slaughter process of a goat, a lamb, and a deer will all be up there. And so those are cool, and those are perfect for the people that want to come to a hands-on class, but maybe we can't get enough to quite sign up for it. But now it's all recorded in film. Yeah. So if you've been a follower for a while, and I know there's thousands of you out there, consider now is the time to become a member or a patron, like an official kind of backer of the Meatsmith project, because we're doing some great things, and I want you along for the ride because I know you're going to enjoy it. Yeah, and we're making some changes too in trying to work more efficiently, because I think that the things that give most to us as a family, and even to me creatively, are producing things for you. And so creating these films and working on the forums, on the membership, and we're going to revamp the Facebook Lives, and writing. All of these creative outlets are incredibly rewarding, and we would like to focus our Meatsmith services and energies on those things. And so that's kind of the general tide that we are trying to rise with, or something. The current that we are trying to sail is the production of winsome and educational material. So a lot of it free for the masses, and then most importantly to me, just really beefing up the membership. Even more than it already is. And if I don't say so myself, we already started off with a super robust, polyvalenced, multi-armed, without being ambiguous, membership. It's pretty cool. And we just want to keep improving it. Yeah, that's what we're diving into full speed ahead in this coming fall. And speaking of fall, because it seems like it's right around the corner, even though we're only halfway through summer. Yeah. But fall classes are up, and they're ready for you to sign up. If you've been thinking about coming to one for a year or 2 or 5, now's a great time. We've got some pigs. They're less than 100 feet away from you right now, and they're ready for you to come and slaughter yourself, butcher them, cure them, sausage them. It's
a full scale experience right here in the shop that you're looking at behind me. And it's just Brandon and 8 other people. And
yeah, here in the shop. And this is also unique in that these pigs are just Meatsmith pigs.
That's right.
Which means that we pretty much can go anywhere in the classes, which is something I wanted to build into them for a while.
We're not selling them to any other people. They're just...
Yeah, we have lots of flexibility in terms of what you want to cover in the class. So that is...
Yeah, if you want to fry up a chop, we're doing it. If you want to roast something extravagant, if you want to taste what crackling really tastes like...
Of course, learn how to cure bacon and ham and guanciale.
Yeah.
Make pate and blood sausage and all that stuff.
So that's it. As far as our announcements, I want to get to the meat. Pun intended. It's summer and we have been just starting to barbecue, and we want to talk about barbecuing with you a little bit. Meat over open flame, whole animal spit roasting, the whole gamut, I think, depending on how much we can get to.
Yeah.
But maybe by way of introduction, there's so many angles I could go at from this. How do we approach this topic? It's so huge. Yeah. So we entered sort of maybe the official barbecue way of life 7 years ago when we, of course we do this. We don't just like barbecue hamburgers.
No.
We splay lambs on crosses. That's like our first introduction to barbecuing.
Yeah.
But we did that 8 years ago.
Yeah.
At our church, we commissioned a local blacksmith to create this cross that they have all over Argentina. And that was an amazing experience for us. We were kind of just getting our feet wet at what true like abundant hospitality looks like. And there is nothing like doing that to experience just the full gamut of feasting and abundance.
It's the ultimate gesture of magnanimity to roast
there you
the
go.
whole
You
animal.
just said it. That was the words I was trying to spit out. Thank you. So we did that eight or so years ago, and only after the fact did we find out that there's actually some resource that you can get now. And maybe actually it's come out in the last handful of years. And then we're also kind of, there's this interesting carnivore diet that is gaining traction in some online audiences that we'd love to learn more about. We're kind of learning about it. It's piquing our interest. What is this, Yeah,
there's no way to introduce variety, no better way to introduce variety into only eating meat than to cook it over wood fire.
Exactly, yeah.
Then it's like you actually have your vegetables.
Right.
But you're not eating any vegetables.
Yeah.
It's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Like the loin, the tender parts that strip right out of a properly fire roasted carcass, that's your broccoli. Because it's really mild and it slips out of fat and sinew, which is where flavor is. And those are your vegetables on an animal roast. And then the exterior, the brown, crispy, bubbling fat and all the heavy use areas like the shoulder and the back legs, that's actually your meat. And you can really get a huge variety of flavors off of one carcass cooked, whole, unparted out, and all experiencing more or less the same kind and application of heat. It really gives you infinite variety there.
So we think that there's something to be learned from this whole movement. Whether or not you're going to dive in full tilt boogie, that may be necessary or not. Everybody's body reacts differently. But I think we have something to contribute to this conversation, definitely.
Yeah.
And even, I guess, if anything, I would hope that if any people are kind of dipping their toes into this lifestyle, that it's not like they're just giving up on all pleasure. You know,
Right.
They actually, it can help you become a better cook.
Yeah. Take your meat vitamins.
Right.
That's not what it
Yeah, that would be the worst thing in the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think the way to actually enjoy that diet is to look into South American methods of meat cookery, which was kind of what we did at the beginning when we wanted to roast this sheep. Mm-hmm. And it was officially a sheep. She was 90 pounds.
That's right.
She was a big girl. Mm-hmm. That was the first animal that I was fully in charge of roasting, you know, like Lauren said 7 or 8 years ago. Mm-hmm. And that was, I had help from friends, and we did it at our church, which has a pretty robust firewood ministry on the island. So the firewood, the fuel was close by. And we were using this cross, which is basically a pipe with holes in it, and 2 crossbars, or transepts, if you will, that are adjustable. And they have little Allen wrench screws that can be used to affix the transepts at various levels along the pole, you know, to accommodate the size of the sheep or goat or venison or even pig. And I basically remember searching Google Images and showing those to my friend Drew, who was the blacksmith. And I said, we just kind of patched one together. And he basically added all the cool elements, the adjustability, the flexibility of it to be able to accommodate different size and weights of animals. That was all his idea. And it works great, and we still have it to this day. And it is a roasting cross. So one of the basic methods of asado, you know, is cooking over fire with a cross, kind of at an angle, and butterflied. And so that the sheep is made as flat as possible. And you can make it even flatter by butterflying it under the shoulder blades. Because with any spit roast or whole carcass roastery, the main challenge, the challenging spot, is in between shoulder blade and rib cage. That meat right in there. And along the top of the neck, the nape. And then right at the hip joints, right around the pelvis. Those are the thickest areas, even on a pig, a sheep, or whatever you're roasting. And I feel like the mark of a successful roast, one that I am truly deeply gratified by and utterly exhausted by, is when that meat is pullable. It's spoonable, you know, it's completely melted through the long, low, slow application of heat. And so I had that in mind at the beginning when we first started roasting at the parish. And it took about 14 hours, I think, for that 90 pound. And she was a fatty, man. We spent a lot of time just melting fat. And we used a lot of firewood. And we got there the night before, and I think we started roasting at like 2 a.m. or some crazy thing. So no sleeps and lots of beer and coffee simultaneously all day, which is just a great way to take care of yourself when you're roasting in the hot sun, is to drink lots of diuretics and dehydrating things, which we'll talk about later too. I had to learn the hard way to take care of myself roasting, because it is such a gesture of magnanimity. You're just like, hey, let's party for 14 hours nonstop. Right? It's like, no.
I know.
Take it easy, cowboy. Yeah. So that was fun. I remember roasting that. I remember it being a revelation when we felt the heat penetrating all the way through the sheep. That was a big deal. Mm-hmm. In fact, I think you can go on our website and see a video of this. If you go on farmsteadmeatsmith.com and you look on the education tab and then you look under film, and this is not just in the membership, this is available to everyone. I think there's a video called Merciless.
Oh yeah, I've
Feast.
posted it already.
Yeah,
it's on one of the other episodes.
Pretty sure that was our first one.
Yeah, we'll post it again.
Okay.
Yeah, it was. That was absolutely. We camped all night that night. It was ridiculous. Yeah. We had one child, so or I think we had 2. Yeah, a baby.
Which means we still don't sleep all night, but it's not necessarily as voluntary as that was. But so that was kind of our first foray into whole animal roasting.
And it was excellent. Yeah. Everyone loved it. And we were blown away too. I mean, we had no idea. We were just stepping into the unknown there.
And the way we made it a full feast, and which is kind of the effortless thing, not effortless, it's very effortful, but simple. It's simple.
Right.
Was you made your flatbread.
Oh, yeah.
And there's huge steel. It was the rest of the cooking setup was basically Cinder Block, which is awesome. And we'll try to talk about kit too.
Yeah.
I guess we just will as we go. But
yeah.
Cinder Block is great because of its flexibility, and it's cheap, but it is super impermanent because the heat dehydrates it and the blocks crack. So you'll just be replacing blocks annually.
So that's another reason why we're interested in it right now, is because we've been doing this for 6, 7, 8 years, and it's great, but it's also taking its toll. Like we're in our mid-30s now. We're not just
we're old
20-something anymore. So I know. So we're actually consulting with our church right now to how to build a real outdoor open fire kitchen.
Yeah.
And it's really fun because we're dreaming big.
And because there's this fine balance between, like, you want it to be primitive, but you also want anyone to kind of be able to do it. And my goal is to make it so that no one has to waste time on dealing with funky kit, but they can focus on just cooking prowess and roasting properly.
Well, you bring up a good point. The whole beauty of it, I think, of wood-fired cooking is this balance of primal appetite and sophisticated. You know, it's a blending.
Yeah.
The final product is beautiful beyond compare, but it also just feeds your human nature, your creatureliness, like nothing else.
Yeah. It's really the end product, you know, the final meal is very coarse and rough and primitive, but it is strangely sublime. I've heard one of the most famous guys talk about it, who cooks outdoors, Francis Mallman, who we'll talk about. He calls it dissonance, you know, that there is a coarseness to it where there's burnt, you know, there's absolutely indubitably burnt parts, and it's a clash of flavors. And I disagree a little bit. I think it's actually it's a super harmony. You know, it's not dissonance. It's actually, it's something unexpected. It's like when you get the harmony of two parts that are polar opposites, but you can actually put them together. You know, that's like a super harmony, rather than things that are only minimally opposite, if you know what I mean. Minimally dichotomous, they're closer to center. It's like, when they harmonize, what we get is inoffensive mildness. And that's cool, and there's a place for that. But when you go all the way out to the poles, and you're serving, you know, burnt, like charred lamb meat, and not burnt, but like definitely carbonized on the outside, with you know, something that totally clashes with it, or you just squeeze lemon on it,
Right. Yeah.
right? Like polar opposites. Completely on the other end of the spectrum of flavor. It's not that they remain dissonant. It's that there's a super harmony. Yeah. And it's amazing. And it's totally out of this world. And I think
someone that knows music might but know the better language.
Yeah.
But it's like quivering on the edge of paradise. I don't know. Paradise and just earth.
Well, I always think of it in terms of the sublime. When which Longinus defined, who was a Roman author, but it's really special, and which is actually something, this actually has practical import, and it is that whatever results from your roasting is not whatever, there's limits to that, but that coarseness, that's cool, that's fine, that's okay. So charredness is good. Even maybe like rareness, that's good. There are things that...
Or charred on the outside.
Yeah.
And a little bit
rare on the inside. You can be more docile to it because the flavor compounds that are involved in, you know, creating the heat, just the wood itself is adding flavor and other elements that allow for more flexibility there. This is not haute cuisine, you know. This isn't really refined gastronomy. But at the same time, it has this extravagant refinement that is more of an expression of this super harmony, this balance.
Well, it does take attention on the part of the roaster.
Right.
Like you were saying before, it exhausts you.
Does.
And it's not because you're like just creating this subpar product. You are intentionally trying to attain this end result.
Yeah.
And it's not like it's actually not 14 hours of partying and like if you're going to be the roaster, get ready for a sacrifice on your part.
Yeah.
Because you're not just going to be hanging back and taking it easy. Like,
it's work.
Which is fine. That has its place in the universe, as you say. But if you are the roasting master, then you got to take it seriously. And, and I don't know, then you also get to take credit, I guess, for this kind of result.
Well, and I think that the reason for that is it's not a flip-flop hammock, beer in hand type of experience, unless you have a very advanced, like, mechanical rotisserie
yes,
spit.
That's turning it for you. And
which also has a place in the universe. But if you want to be really primitive, it's not so much a recipe where it's like you plug and play, lamb plus heat plus salt plus olive oil equals nice roast lamb after so many hours per so many pounds, with my, laser thermometer telling me the heat the whole time. None of that. Like, don't even bring a thermometer. That's one of the rules, I think. Tacit rules, but maybe it should be spoken, that you should not have a thermometer. And what that means is that rather than driving and coercing your medium into this perfect end result, is you are responding moment by moment to what the fire is telling you. So it is a constant conversation. You are reading the cooking constantly. And, I will readily confess that I do this to an obsessive, well, indubitably unhealthy degree, because it has taken me out a couple times. Because I do obsess over, I want that shoulder meat to be absolutely pullable.
Yeah.
I want it to be utterly perfect. I want, if I'm roasting a pig, I want the skin to have achieved perfect cosmic crisposity while simultaneously achieving perfect melted pulled pork underneath the skin, which is no small thing. And I can definitely work my way into, mental overload with that. But that is kind of the thing that excites me about it, is that you're constantly responding. You are constantly, you're constantly responding with creativity. And that's what's enticing to me. So you have to be flexible. Like, I've run out of wood before when I'm roasting a pig for a wedding.
That was a koonie that was like way bigger around than it was long.
Right.
So you hadn't quite penetrated the interior of it yet.
And it was full of rabbits.
Oh my gosh, that's right.
And it was a koonie, so it had 3 inches of back fat to cook through already. And I blew through a 3/4 of a cord of alder, because alder, note to everyone, goes from flame to ash. There's really not a lot of time where it hangs out in that nice thermally efficient ember stage. And so I had to go into the forest and chop down dead trees.
That's right.
And dead trees are dry. And a lot of times standing deadwood it dries very quickly because the moisture escapes, a lot of it, through the leaves before they fall off. So when you find yourself out of wood, you can duck into the forest, at least in the Pacific Northwest, and pick the trees that don't have leaves. Chances are that stuff is kindling and it is ready to burn. Anyway, that kind of scramble, or that kind of personal demand on your creativity means that you can't just throw your hands up and be like, nah, we lost it. It's like, no, you can not only make it work, but maybe it'll taste even better as a result of this. And that is so fun. That's where the real creativity comes in. Yeah. I think.
Yeah.
With whole animal roastery.
It's fun for you.
Yeah.
There are some people that they'd rather, it depends on, what battle you want to pick, what kind of party you want to have. Like Americans, they like to just, just pay more attention to their friends, their people, which
Right.
they should be doing.
Yeah.
And, it has happened where you've roasted at a wedding, like my sister's wedding, and then he's like went and took a nap afterward because it just took so much out of you. And you are a certain kind of person, but...
I am a certain kind of person. It was a blazing hot day, too.
It was. It
to
really,
be fair.
and we were still learning how to take care of yourself, right? It was like your third or fourth or fifth roast, and a couple of times. Well, one time you landed in the hospital.
Yeah, that was weird. But yeah, I think so. Yeah, I guess we should talk about monitoring your health while you're roasting.
Yeah.
And then I want to talk about apparatus, and I want to talk about cooking fat animals and wood and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But one thing that I found, and maybe you can diagnose yourself, unlike I was not able to do that. But I am super creative, so I am really inspired by the having to be resourceful and sagacious in the middle of the roast. Like, I love it. And I love having primitive tools. I've got an axe, and I've got matches, and I don't even have a thermometer. And I have cinder blocks and a stick of steel and a carcass that I killed. And I'm going to turn all of that very rough, primal, primitive material into something that is extravagantly refined and beautiful.
Yeah.
And meltingly tender. So I love that challenge. And I love being that feeling of being stranded a little bit.
Yeah.
That I don't have all the kit. I can't fall back on anything but my own resource, what I bring with me. On the other hand, I do have a super high standard. And I will drive myself into the ground trying to make that shoulder meat perfectly pullable.
Yeah.
Which, you know what? It's probably okay. If 3 ounces on the entire carcass is not meltingly tender, okay?
We just don't want people killing themselves.
You could probably be okay with that.
Yeah.
But I lose sight of that sometimes. And and in that sense, my own desire to be left out there, and to rely on my own resources and to be creative and to respond in the moment, it runs up against my own anxiety because I'm also prone to anxiety.
Yeah.
It's like, so I plunge just by personality, I plunge myself into really sketchy situations, and I usually make it work, and it's great.
No, you do. Yeah.
But then it's like I underestimate that that exhausts me more than I think, because I'm so full in the heat of the moment, of the inspiration of this creation of the roast, that I forget that I am depleting my tank like crazy. I am tacking way too high. My RPMs are high, and my tank is almost empty, and I still have 5 hours of roasting to go, and I'm not even aware of that. And so I have done this, and
just crashed for a couple days after.
Yeah, it's crazy. And what I experience it as is like a hangover. And I will even experience the hangover if I don't drink and if I stay hydrated. That's the crazy thing. And so it'll take me out the next day where it's like I'm nauseous, I'm horrible pounding headache. I'm like, what? I drank water. I ate. I didn't touch any beer.
This really came to light when you were in the shade the entire day.
Yeah.
And you were like dousing yourself with water. You were doing everything right, taking care of yourself, and it still happened. And we're like, okay, it's stress. It's
mental. That made me realize it's mental. It's a state of mind, which was just so silly that distresses me out. But it's like this perfect storm of my personality and that act of roasting for a whole bunch of people. And I'll tell you what the main stressor is timing. So this is the big one. And when it comes to roasting an animal for yourself or for your family, the other rule I would add, in addition to the no thermometer rule, is the no deadline rule.
Yes.
And which doesn't work clearly for a wedding or for any event, that you might be hired for.
In American culture, too, it's really hard.
It is tricky. Yeah.
Housewives are like, okay, dinner's at 6, and then you really have to deliver dinner at 6, or you're going to get in trouble.
And, you can definitely work it out. Just start. So if you have a deadline, the general rule is Give yourself, you have your allotted time for roasting. And let's say for a 30-pound lamb, let's give ourselves 12 hours. If you have a deadline, give yourself 4 extra hours. Okay, maybe that's a little much. Give yourself 2 extra hours. Seriously.
Yeah.
Because even if you're done roasting 3 hours early and you just scoot the embers back a little bit or scoot the animal back away from the embers, whatever it may be, that thing will still be obviously forking tender and finger burning hot. Like it'll still be crazy hot. And it will only benefit from that prolonged rest. Trust me. So just keep in mind that at the end of the actual earnest cooking of the meat, you have at least 3 hours of rest. And if it's a pig, you have even more, okay? And it'll still be hot. It'll be awesome. So there's no reason to feel like, oh no, I have to have the earnest cooking going until just 40 minutes before service or else the meat's going to be cold. It's like, no, that is not the case. That is only the case if you peel the meat off and then put it in trays. Then you lose thermal efficiency right away. But other than that, if it stays on the bone, it stays on the carcass, you're going to have long time, prolonged heat availability there. But I was talking about deadline. So the thing about not having a deadline is that you eat the animal when it is ready. And I love that. And because it actually requires a little bit of, it demands that there be hangout time and that people are waiting on the feast, right? Rather than the feast waiting on the people. And for situations where you're not being hired and you don't have a wedding party to serve, I would make that the preliminary qualifier, is we take it off and we serve it up when it's perfect, when it's ready. Which means you as the roaster start 4 hours earlier than you think you need to. And to account for all of the things that can go wrong, like having to go make an emergency run for more wood, or maybe you have to switch to charcoal because you ran out of your wood or something. You want to be able to account for all those things. So no thermometer, and it really helps to not have a deadline. Because for me, I can't tell you, for my bizarre personality, the added anxiety that comes with, I know I want it to be pullable under the shoulder and at the pelvis and perfectly browned on the outside simultaneously at 4:30.
Yeah.
That's rough. That makes my heart explode.
Yeah, it just made me...
Slowly.
Yeah.
It makes my heart explode throughout the whole day. And it sneaks up on you, and you don't notice it.
Yeah.
But one time we roasted... It was the first lamb roast, right? This is the other story of how frail my mentality is when I'm roasting. For some reason, I don't know why I have this frailness, but... We roasted, and then we butchered in the shop, and we had an NPR interview come over. Remember that?
Yeah.
And then we had friends over for dinner. And I'm like, this is the greatest day of my life. Like,
who are low in enthusiasm.
I know. We were just confirmed, and we just roasted an animal for hundreds of people, and we had our friends over, and we had an NPR interview. And that night, I lost the ability to speak. My brain swelled. It's crazy.
It scared me a little bit.
Yeah, I actually had temporary aphasia where I could not utter verbiage.
He just looked at me and...
Yeah, I could only shake my head at people.
Smiled and...
Like, I hear ya, but I can't say anything. It was very bizarre.
I did not know that was going to come out.
It was a little spooky.
We took you to the hospital.
Yeah.
And... once we knew kind of what was happening, I was okay. But
okay, yeah, which was like the next day when I started speaking again, because I don't remember ever knowing what was happening. I just remember, all the EMT guys in the ambulance
who are super great. On
they're
great.
By the way. We love them. Ignacia knows them, or Therese. But they were great. I just remember them like telling me jokes and like asking me really lowball questions, like, "Does it rain a lot in Seattle?" And I'm just like. Nothing. I can utter no words. Got to the hospital, and I remember the ER docs looking at me, just kind of.
Yeah.
We don't know really what this is, and they did scans, and they found, one side of your brain is just a little swollen, and that was the only thing that they found, and then it gradually decreased in swelling, apparently. And I started to be able to speak again. But that definitely put the fear into me of overextending myself.
Yeah.
And it's primarily tricky because it does sneak up on you. It sneaks up on you. You're not quite aware because you're just so...
You're caught up in the moment.
in the moment.
I mean,
yeah.
there really is a spirit about it, especially right before you take it off.
Yeah.
Or like in our case, if you're doing flatbread. So you want to save flatbread to the very end because you want to try to serve them together. And so when you're basically turning up the heat for everything, you're really cranking the heat.
Yeah.
And the animal is finishing its final blast, and you're doing the flatbread at the same time, like 3 feet away.
Yeah.
It's exciting, and you just can't. It's like a rush.
It's very intense.
It's so cool.
It's like a 40-hour moment. You know, like you're in the moment. It's about 40 hours.
Yeah.
At least that one was.
All in 1 hour.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we should talk about that, about the flatbread, because people are going to ask, well, how do you make the flatbread?
Oh, gosh. Okay.
And I would say that the way at least it works for us is usually the animals are cooling, or, you know, they're resting. So like I'll take the animal off the spit. It's sitting on a table. It's at its rest, which is a minimum of an hour. And then we start cooking flatbread.
Oh, I thought we've done it together. We've done it both ways.
Well, I think this last time was the best.
You're right.
We cook during the rest because remember, the rest it's not indefinite, but it's always much longer than you think.
Yeah.
A whole carcass can rest a very long time without
It depends
getting
on
cold.
how big the animal is too, but yeah.
But at least an hour and you're solid. And by that time, you probably cooked a lot of the flatbread, because I would say cold flatbread is probably worse than tepid meat.
Okay.
To be honest.
Yeah, you're right.
And what we do with the flatbread is it's your starter. It's not a yeasted thing. And we happen to have cinder blocks along with everyone else in the northern 48, and but sheets of steel, and these suckers are like a 1/4 inch thick, and they're crazy heavy. And we prop those up on a couple levels of cinder block, and the fire is just crazy hot underneath. Because it's a fast cook. And, you know, you throw some olive oil on the steel and it just immediately vaporizes into gas and smokes off. And then we make the flatbread. We cook it on that. And, I mean, they're cooking literally for like 20 seconds each, maybe, flipped once with a pizza peel, you know, a gigantic pizza spatula. But how do you start the flatbread? How do you make it? It's finished with that quick fry, olive oil, salt. Boom, done. That's the flatbread.
Yeah.
But
back it up 12 hours.
Yeah.
So I started the night before. And it's very similar to my regular bread, which I'm hoping I can do like a video on at some point. But I have a sourdough starter. That's the key. So find someone with a sourdough starter that they can give you a little bit of, and then you grow that, basically, which growing your starter just means creating more starter. So you're not trying to make dough yet. You're just trying to add enough water and flour in the measure that it increases in volume, but it stays the same consistency.
So super goopy and liquid.
Goopy and liquidy.
It's not dough at all.
No.
Yeah. Sticky.
And for a roast of the size that we do, I started out in a bowl, just a regular big kitchen bowl, and I grow it to fill that, basically. And then I dump that into a big bus tub, like the bus tubs you use when you're butchering.
Can carry 30 pounds of meat.
Right.
Or 50, sorry.
Yeah, and I fill that at least halfway, maybe a little over halfway. And then by the time it rises, it's like at least 2/3 of the way full. And then, so yeah, I grow the starter in the bus tub to about maybe 1/3 of the way, and then I create my dough.
Does that take a couple hours?
It takes,
Okay.
about maybe a hand. It depends on what time of year it is. That's the other thing.
So it's the heat. So you just got to watch it.
Watch it, but have it grow to about 1/3 of the way up to a bus tub, and then create your dough at that point, which is adding way more flour than water at this point because you're wanting it to be thicker, but not too thick because I've made it too thick, and then it's just, you really want a good moisture level in it. And if you are developing the gluten properly, then it won't just fall apart into mush.
No crumbly.
Yeah. So it's a balance, and you can find resources out there. I would recommend Tartine, Tartine, and we'll put a link to it. It's the best book out there that talks about growing your own starter, for instance, and making your own sourdough bread. But it has the ratios that you may want to just start with, because I don't know the ratios. I've never been that scientific about it. And that's why it's taken me 3 years to get good at it. So if you want to maybe get good at it before then, look at the exact precise ratios. They give you this percentage flour to salt to water.
Okay.
And I don't have all that in my brain, but
so it's risen to 2/3 of the bus tub.
Yeah.
And then you add flour and water, an indefinite quantity that they can find in Tartine, and learn that ratio.
No, fill the bus tub to 1/3 of the way of just the starter.
Okay.
And then you're going to create the dough, which will rise it up to about half of the bus tub.
Okay.
And then once the dough rises, then you're looking at 2/3 of the bus tub filled.
Wow.
And that's enough for a pretty solid party.
How many does that feed in terms of flatbread? What are we shooting for when we do the roast? Is it 150, 200 people?
Yeah.
So in between 100 and 200 people.
Yeah.
That's the quantity.
Well, yeah, it is, because then you have a lot of leftover flatbread if you have it. If not, then you don't have it. But it's leftover flatbread's always a good thing.
Yeah.
So I always make a lot more.
And then once it's all doughy and risen or proofed, is that the other word for that? Then you throw a bunch of flour on a flat surface.
Make sure you're turning it. Make sure you're stretching it. It's a no-knead bread. It's a no-knead recipe. So, but you do have to every half hour to an hour turn it, which is like stretching and folding it just a few times all the way around the bus tub.
But not like pushing in and wringing it out and flattening it and rolling it. It's
you're
none
just
of that.
Kind of like awakening the glutens. Just like, come on, baby glutens, like let's be alive here, but you're not trying to kill them. So another way I frame it is, you want to catch it when it's on its way up, but not all the way up. You want to catch it when it's on the rise. If you catch it and you start making bread with it when it's fully risen, then it's going to die in the process of making your dough balls or your bread or whatever it is. So you want to catch it when it's still kind of young, when it's still rising.
On the gain, like sheep in the spring.
Exactly.
You want to slaughter your animals when they're on the gain on spring grass, everybody.
Yeah. Exactly. And then, so when you've caught that, so the timing of that is kind of important and tricky, but I've gotten pretty good at it with this party. You make sure you have a friend who just became Catholic, who also was a baker. That's what you do, because that's what I did this year. I passed off the actual frying of it to my good friend, who just entered the church, and I was like, here, you do the bread. And I ran away, and he just kind of did the rest. But he had experience shaping the dough balls in a really beautiful way. And then him and you.
This was a roast at our church, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is the Divine Mercy Sunday roast, and you don't have to be a Catholic, but anyone can come. By the way, everyone is invited. It's the Sunday after Easter.
That's right. Every year.
We roast 2 or 3. It's been goats for the past couple of years. Over open flame on this huge field where your kids can run around and play, but you can see them. It's kind of awesome. That's kind of what the event is.
Let me wind Therese back up here. Get her going. But yeah, then you get someone, or you practice shaping the dough balls, basically, into round balls about the size of a softball maybe.
Yeah.
And then you get little 12-year-old girls to help you flatten them out. And you use lots of flour so that they don't get sticky.
During the shaping.
Right.
Yeah.
You kind of shape them out into pizza-size flatbreads, like the size of a basketball maybe. And then sprinkle it with a heavy sprinkle of olive oil and salt. and then you fry them up. And you hand them off to the fire crew, and you guys fry them really well. You guys have gotten really good, and I kind of stay out of that. But.
Yeah, you'll see with flatbread, they will, if your steel is sufficiently hot, you'll see, and I think if you catch it on the rise, like you were saying, I think that's a big part of it. You'll see huge bubbles form in the dough, like just immediately. It'll go on that heat and bubble up, like it's trying to get off of the steel.
Yeah.
It's like, it's trying to jump off of it. And it's really just a matter of seconds. And I like to flip it. And when I flip it, I want to see on the side that was just being cooked, like distinct black spots. You absolutely want char, indisputable char. And it's just a balance, it's a matter of learning what the balance is of char to nicely browned to cooked, but still pretty, clear white dough, but fully cooked, And the way, the first couple flatbreads are always a bit of a test as you figure out how to monitor doneness depending on the completely unmeasurable heat of your fire, because there's no thermometer action going on. And I just rip the thickest part of the bread, which is usually the corners, and you just want to see no dough, nice airy pockets of air in there, that it has been fully cooked all the way through.
And we've gotten better at it over the years. So the first couple of years, it was still delicious, but it wasn't probably as good as we've done the last couple of years. So just dive in and start doing it.
Yeah.
It's always...
That's a great accompaniment.
A crowd pleaser.
And then the other thing that we tend to do for a spit roast, so we've got the meat, we've got the bread, is we tend to, if it's roasting in the spring and we're outside, as is often the case, I like to make a sauce. And a good base for a sauce is stock. And we always have several quarts on hand. And then we always have lots of beer or wine or other libations on hand as well. And between those two, you've got a good base for a sauce. And so we bring a big Dutch oven, and it's a Le Creuset thing, and you can put those right on the fire. You could build a little, stand with the cinder blocks and pile embers in there. So you're obviously going to need shovels. And I use welder's gauntlets, welder's gloves that come up your arm a ways that you can just grab, crazy hot steel with those things. And reduce the sauce for several hours, and I'll reduce like 2 gallons or so of the stock, and then the stock is just rich. That's just savory. So that's like that is the intense meat flavor. And if you want to balance that, bring in something apparently dissonant but actually really harmonious. Bring in the wine, something that has acid to it that can cut that intense richness. Or like, I remember one year, Andrew, who was roasting with us over at farmrun.com, you can check out his work, but he made that Merciless Feast video, and he was roasting with us for the first couple years. And we had a bunch of peaches, like gallons of them, from the pig slop. Because you'll find if you gather pig slop from grocery stores that they wait until all the fruit is ripe and then they throw it away, because it starts to not look pretty on the shelf, but it actually is when it tastes the best. And so there were just these buckets of peaches, and he took the time to boil them all down and put them in deli containers, I think, and just freeze them. And so that was a significant portion of the sauce. So when you boil fruit or pulverized, boiled down, reduced fruit, it lends that tanginess that I'm talking about. And you want that tanginess to counter the savoriness. And then you go into the woods and you get a bunch of nettle if the season is right. And
That's right.
So you send a bunch of kids out to gather nettle and bring it back, and
with gloves.
With gloves.
Just send kids out to pick
them. And just tell them to pick the tops, the tender tops, not the stringy stalks, and throw that in the sauce right towards the end.
Yeah.
And that was
delicious.
That's kind of a complete deal. That's a complete meal, is the sauce, which you can sneak greens into of any kind, and then the bread as a delivery device for the meat and a absorbent apparatus for the sauce and then the meat. And that's kind of part of this complete feast.
So what we do, just for your party planning purposes, to make it feel more doable, is we always say we provide the meat and the bread, and then it's a potluck for all the other, side dishes, salads, drinks, that kind of thing. That way you can really focus on the thing that's going to wow everyone, and then everyone else they chip in, the other things, and then some great things come out of the woodworks. Desserts that are just amazing, and so
that's kind of, I guess, a really prolonged description of our first kind of roasting event. And some of the things I've learned over the years with that is people ask me, what is the recipe? How do you cook a whole carcass? And this goes for being a spit, like a pig on a spit, or a lamb butterflied on a cross. On the spit, you're obviously rotating 360 degrees and applying the heat to the entire circumference of the pig. Or a lamb that is butterflied and it's just flipped one side to the other, the front side and the back side. In every case, I feel like as close as you can get to delineating a recipe is low and slow. That's it. How seriously are you going to take low and slow? And the reason that is important is because the most common error in whole animal roasting is the charring of the outside and the utter uncooking of the inside. And so the outside can be nice and browned and looks really good. And then you cut into it and it's like, oh, it's raw. It's not really cooked in here. And that is by far and away the most common mistake.
Which is different than what we were saying before, which is you do want charred on the outside and kind of juicy on the inside. But that's more like individual bites. You don't actually want a full pig like burnt on the outside and then raw on the belly.
Well, and I would say it's juicy on the inside not because it's rare.
Right.
So here's the cool trick.
Yeah.
It's really hard to overcook a whole carcass over the heat of fire if you're cooking slowly. It's hard to overcook it.
Okay. Because
that long, slow application of heat and the sheer thickness of a whole carcass keeps everything moist. All the fat is intact. So certainly with young lambs, you can dry it out. That's kind of easy to do. But if you got a fat old sheep and pretty much a pig of almost any age, unless something real young like a suckling pig, it's really hard to dry those things out. And the moisture, the interior moisture, doesn't come from it being a low temperature. It comes from it being braised in its own fat on the inside. And all of that water not escaping out of the severed ends of muscles, which happens when you butcher a carcass because it's still whole. So it's boiling in the water that is in the meat and in the fat that is amongst the lean of the flesh. That's why it's tender and juicy on the inside. So when I think of cooking an animal, I'm thinking of low and slow, knowing that you're trying to achieve two things: the crispification of the outside and cooking of the inside, which means it's really tempting to go for one at the expense of the other, particularly the crispification of the outside. And that is really when things go bad.
Yeah, because we've heard of horror stories. Well, and then I shouldn't say they're horror because people always end up having a good time, and they might, like, if something does go bad, they'll just like chop it up and throw it all on a grill.
Yes.
And that's fine.
Yes.
But what does happen is they actually have achieved burntness on the outside, and it's not even cooked, like not even warm on the inside. I think that's what you're talking about.
Yeah, that's bad news.
Yeah.
And so what I think about when I'm roasting to that end is delay the browning of the exterior as long as possible. That's what that means. So basically, I flip the animal if it's on a cross, or turn it if it's on a spit, as frequently as is necessary to prevent it from browning on that part that is exposed to the direct heat. So sometimes that means I flip it every 5 minutes. or sometimes it's every 10 minutes. Like I don't even time it, at all. It's just, I want to prevent the browning. I don't want to see it. If it's browning in like 30 seconds, you need to tune the fire way down and increase the rate of your rotations or flippage of the splayed lamb. So delay the browning because that is allowing the heat to penetrate all the way to the bone, heat up the bones, radiate off the bones, cook the inside. And then if that's all you're focusing on is cooking the inside, by the time it's pullable and falling apart and spoonable under that shoulder blade, it'll be perfectly browned on the outside.
Right, without having to whack up the heat.
Yeah. So I guess one way to think of it is you don't have to brown the outside.
That's
think
true.
about, focus on cooking the inside, and the outside will brown itself. It'll take care of itself.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Now, there are a couple exceptions to this, and these are things that you can avoid by being judicious in the animal you select. So, it's hard for me to say this, but fat animals are not ideal for spit roasting. It's blasphemous to say fat animals are unideal in any sense, but to this end, if you have a pig with 2.5 inches of back fat, you're going to use 3/4 of your wood fuel and 3/4 of your time melting that fat cap before the heat barely even gets to the flesh. I mean, just think about that. You have 2.5 inches of lard to make and melt, which you can if you time for it, and you put a big hotel pan with deep sides underneath the spit, the pig, to catch the dripping fat, and then you can throw in your super eggy dough to make your Yorkshire pudding. That's what official Yorkshire pudding is. It's cooked in the blazing hot oil of a spit roasted animal. So that's one reason to avoid the fat animals, the little lard pigs. Those are tricky. Those are the ones that are the most demanding. The other general guideline I would say is, the question I get most commonly is, how do you know it's done? And in a oven setting world, everyone knew it. And it was when the pig falls from the spit.
It's done when it's done.
Yes. So like even in Comedy of Errors, when two twins are confused for each other by their wives and their entire families, and it's this horrific, confusing thing. And the women are calling their husbands back, but they're not their husbands because of their twin brother. One thing that the women are not confused about is that it's dinner time because the pig falls from the spit. That's what she tells him. The pig is falling from the spit. Yeah. It's time. It is time to eat. Come home. And he's like, I don't know you. It's really funny. But so when the pig falls from the spit, and so practically what that means is literally, I have a pretty rudimentary spit setup. My cross is pretty dialed. It's nice, my roasting cross. But it's just, a steel bar with holes drilled in it. And I put it through the mouth of the pig and through the hole in the pelvis. And then I tie where the anus goes, when you're eviscerating a pig, the canal, sometimes known. And then you tie up the legs so they're tucked in so the pig is aerodynamic, like the flying pig from The Simpsons. When they did a backyard barbecue and spit roasted the pig, and Homer chased it down the aqueduct as it was flying because it got launched somehow, and he's shouting, "It's still good, it's still good," because it goes in the water and through dumpsters and stuff. But you tie up the leg so it's aerodynamic, and then you run skewers through pig, through the holes in the spit, and then through the other side of the pig, several of them. And that is what ensures that the pig spins with the spit.
Right.
Utterly essential. And for pigs...
So pins kind of perpendicular to that main spit.
That's right. They're going through the holes in the spit. Yeah. It's not enough for them just to kind of be wedged up against it. They have to be going through holes drilled in the bar. I distracted myself. Oh, yes. So literally with that setup, I know I'm getting done when I go to turn it to its next... And I turn it by quarters, if you know what I mean. Because
there's 4 little cross bars on one end of the spit, so he can kind of notch and hold it.
Yeah, I can turn it by quarters each time of its rotation. And when I do that, just turning it a quarter, the whole carcass like jiggles, and I think it's going to fall off into the dirt.
That's right.
That's how you know when it's done. So the other things that you'll see if it's done is bone. So the meat is falling off the bone, right? That's when the collagen has been significantly broken down into gelatin. So it no longer has its chewiness and its strength to hold flesh to bone. It is melted.
Yeah.
And when you can start to see shoulder blade, you can start to see pelvis especially. You want to see those things. You want to see that meat peeling back because it's shrinking as it's cooking, and see exposed bone. That's one of that's how you know it's done, when it's about to fall off. And that's why it's tricky to have a deadline, because you're working towards that solidly for like 8 hours to make sure you get there by 4:30 or whatever, to account for the hour rest and then the 40 minutes it's going to take you to pull all the meat off the bone. Don't underestimate how long it takes to pull the meat off the bone.
Yeah.
Wear thermal gloves, because even after an hour rest, it will be burning your fingers. And then, putting it in wide hotel pans. And I still do one last drizzle of salt on that meat that's pulled off. When it comes to the lambs, I like to anoint them with a pot of water. It's a brine. Salmuera means brine. And it is water with salt. I don't know how much, a handful or something. And then a whole clove of garlic, or, bulb. Just cut it all the way across the cloves and throw it in there. And we like to use a rosemary branch as a brush. And you dip that in there and paint it on whenever you feel like it. And you're salting. And so one way that I measure the salt is I look at the sheep and I think, if I were going to salt this entire creature by hand right now, so this perfectly salted, how much salt would I use? By the handful.
Yeah.
That's how much salt goes into your brine.
That makes sense.
So those things, avoid the deadline. Don't use thermometers. It's done when it's about to fall off the spit, or you can see bone. And the recipe is low and slow. Don't brown it early. Let the browning happen accidentally, incidentally, as a result of you cooking all the way down into the bone and making that meat pullable.
Yeah.
So if I had to say, my ideal roast, perfect roast, quivering in harmony with the music of the spheres, is not a rare one. Even though rare has its place in the universe, it is pullable all the way down to the bone. And even the lean, tender muscles, like the loins, they're encased in many sheaths of collagen and fat when they're being roasted on the carcass. So they're not going to be dry like a chop would be if you overcooked it. It's because the fibers have been cut perpendicular to the direction that they run, and all their water quickly runs out into the pan as you're frying it, but it's intact in the whole carcass. So it's not going to dry out. Don't worry about drying it out.
Yeah.
On a young lamb and a young goat, you'll get that rib meat in between the ribs that's real thin. That'll get crispy and dry. That's just kind of part of, and that stuff is delicious. Don't poo-poo it.
Yeah.
So don't worry about that. But I would say those are
the principles, the way you approach.
Those are the principles that I approach.
You were about to say wood. You wanted to talk about wood.
Yes. So, I think more important than the species of wood is the management of it. And usually you want the application of heat to be indirect, which is to say you don't want the meat to be directly over flame with nothing in between it. Because particularly if it's coniferous wood, it'll be covered in really bitter flavors. And I think too, if a lot of fat drips onto like wood that is aflame, that burning fat smoke is not very pleasant. It can make the exterior just a little acrid or bitter. So the general rule is indirect. And you can achieve that two ways. You can have a primary fire that's sole purpose is to create embers. And they have really cool grates for this, or you could rig up your own. Or, just make a fire on the ground and use a shovel to scoop out the hot embers in the midst of the burning pieces of wood, and you put those under. The other,
That's right.
under the cooking meat, the other way is to create a fire and put the meat next to it. But not over it.
But not over it.
And then you can even use, so that's usually what I do. I use both. I create the fire so that the radiant heat from the flaming fire is kind of cooking the top part of the lamb as it's hanging there.
Because it's at an angle.
Yeah.
So there's a fire that's kind of, the vertical heat is going up and it's cooking the top part of the lamb that's furthest from the ground.
Yeah, but even that top part isn't over the fire.
Right.
It's not over it.
Yeah.
And then I'll rake embers from that fire under the carcass. And so it's definitely cooking from that radiant flame.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's the basic deal. And then, and as far as wood selection goes, anything will work. Anything, really. I mean, maybe not cedar. But even then, if you can keep it indirect enough, that would just be incredibly a huge waste of time and effort. The wood that is the most enjoyable to cook with is the wood that has the most prolonged stage as an ember, because then it locks in that long, very manageable application of heat. Alder is excellent because it smells and tastes good. But at least up here, our red alder, it dries so quickly. And before you know it, in terms of seasoning, it's like flame ash with nothing very much in between.
Yeah.
And you end up using a lot of it because it goes through that process quite quickly. And what you want is the most useful period is the in-between, or the embers. Or the coals, I guess you could call them.
And so what
coals.
wood gives you good embers?
So madrone is pretty great for that, which is an evergreen hardwood that is kind of unique to this area. But then, oak obviously is awesome. We don't have a whole lot of that, definitely not for burning in our region. But oak would just be crazy great. Any really good firewood would be awesome. Birch should work, but I would debark it first because there's lots of tar in birch bark.
Right.
Fir works, but again, I like to keep it indirect, particularly in the case of Douglas fir, which we have aplenty. We basically live amidst a fir monocrop here. Great for structures, but if it's a conifer tree and you're kind of limited to that, and you can help it, if you use fir wood that is older, well, not necessarily older, that has grown slower, it will be less pitchy. So if you look at the growth rings and they're really close together, and it could be a young or an old tree, that means that that tree was struggling. It was growing in an understory. So it's really dense and it's hard and it's going to be less pitchy for you. Whereas if you look at the growth rings on a fir tree and they're really widely spaced, that tree was a glutton. It was growing, without any limitations. Maybe it was a tree in the middle of the field, wasn't competing for light at all, branches everywhere, growing super fast, which firs will. I mean, you can harvest one plot like 5 times in 80 years.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Wow.
Firs, that's why they're the money tree. And so if the growth rings are far apart, you will notice lots of black smoke coming from that wood. And that is Stygian bitterness. That is not good. In fact, the flavor of that smoke is, the closest thing I can liken it to is chlorine. It's kind of like dipping it. It's this choline, weird, it's not good. It's not a good flavor. And I would say even that you could use. Just try to keep it, indirect-ish. With that one, you probably would only want to use the embers, because usually by the time the fir is an ember, that stuff is burnt off. But again, fir doesn't stay as an ember very long, kind of like alder. So up here in our region, maple is excellent. Usually when I roast, it's a combination of maple and alder, oak. And I'll even, in a pinch, I'll use berry bushes. We have these evergreen berry bushes that are woody, super woody, like You could get them with a machete, but you kind of want your chainsaw, that kind of woody. We have evergreen huckleberry bushes, and when they're dry, that makes really good wood.
Yeah.
Of course, it's inefficient because it's a little tiny, nothing larger than a softball, or a hardball, a baseball. But so that can work. And then charcoal is not bad. You'll need many, many bags of it. And it's tricky because in that case too, you kind of have a primary and a secondary fire. It's best to think of it that way. Because the charcoal is really only manageable and ignited sufficiently when it's ashen, when it's white, when it's ashed over.
Okay.
And if you're adding brand new charcoal to your already ashed over pile, which you will inevitably need to do, to roast for 8 hours on end, that new stuff, it pops and fizzes and it shoots little charcoal dust all over the meat, and it gets raging hot. It shoots the temperature up crazy high.
Okay.
And you lose your nice even lower heat of ashed over charcoal. So that in that situation, I still like to have a primary and a secondary. Even if the primary fire means it's a little further away, but still radiating heat to help cook. The best wood I've ever cooked with was that almond wood at your sister's wedding.
Oh, really?
That was awesome. That was the smallest pile of wood we've ever used.
You're right.
That was like a quarter cord.
We were kind of freaking out about it at first because we're like, this is it?
Yeah.
And
no problem.
we didn't even use all of it.
Oh my goodness. That stuff burned so slow, so hot,
It was like
so long.
1/8 of a cord or something like that.
Yeah, I think it was an 1/8 to a half a cord or 3/4 of a cord of alder.
Yeah.
So that's the difference in wood selection, which can be a significant impact if you're buying wood on the price of the roast. So,
and also just your time, like you're not working as hard to split wood and create different piles
because almond is smaller. Yeah.
Right.
I didn't really have to split.
Oh, you didn't have to split that much.
Yeah,
you're right.
It was smaller.
Okay. What about some resources that we've gathered along the way? I can think of 3 main resources that have been inspirational and actually one that we just discovered this week. But there's Francis Mallman, this 7 Fires man, and we discovered him actually years ago when we saw him on a neat show, a chef's documentary, and we have the book right here. It's called 7 Fires, Grilling the Argentine Way.
Yeah. This is kind of the authority on open fire cookery of all kinds.
Show the back picture.
Outside. And the cool thing about this is it's all, he's got a whole list of, 7 methods of cooking with wood flame outside. And none of them are a spit, by the way, which is kind of cool. It's all South American. It's all, flat surfaces of steel, otherwise known as a chapa. And grates and grills and crosses, and even like this thing he calls an infernil, which is 2 grates, 3 grates, fire on top, fire on the bottom, and in the middle of the things that you're cooking. He has chapters on roasting whole fish or legs of pork completely encrusted in salt, which is kind of cool.
Wow.
I've never done that. That would take a lot of salt, but it sounds awesome. And then cooking in ash, the dying embers / ashes of your meat roasting fire. You can bury things in there. And we've barely mentioned vegetable cooking over flame, but it is so awesome.
We did it the other night when we were having steaks, which we hardly ever do, but we did it, and we had some beets and potatoes lying around.
And onions.
That's right, onions too.
And that is one of the funnest things. And our apparatus is as complex as a Weber grill, because it is a Weber grill that I found for free on the road. And we had everything with it. It was great. The Weber barbecue just seems to follow us around. It keeps being the apparatus of choice. And so we grilled lots of vegetables on it. And my favorite thing to grill on a barbecue is whole onions. Don't peel them. Just anything you put on the grill, generously anoint with the oil of the olive and lots of salt. So just as a general rule, you can't go wrong with that, whether it's vegetable or animal. Olive oil and salt. And then with the onions, don't peel them. Leave the crisp, dry skin on the outside, but still get it, nice and slathered with oil and onion or oil and salt.
Yeah.
And I just put that on the corner of it and keep that thing on there until it is black on the outside. And then it's so delicious because you will have every gradation of onion preparedness.
That's right.
All the way down to the center. You've got the caramelized charred onions on the outside,
the layers,
which are delicious.
Yeah.
And then caramelized right under that. And then sweated right under that, and then raw at the core. And it's so
raw
delicious.
But warm.
Yeah. And so I like to cut them crosswise and then hit them again with salt and olive oil.
Yeah.
And they're falling apart by that point.
Yeah.
And it's just so delicious to add that to your flatbread with your pulled meat.
Tell them how to do the root vegetables.
So roots are so great this way. And sorry, that was a weird way to say that. They are usually, this is a great way to use big woody beets or any woody root vegetables that are just kind of annoying you because they're like the size of a softball and they're hard to use just because of their size.
Yeah.
And so you want...
Whoa. Oh, I knew that was coming. She lerped.
Terezi.
That's fine.
It's a lerp. Huge root vegetables are best for this. And so because they are so huge, and I would put potatoes in this category too. Yams, sweet potatoes. They need a boil. So,
Yes.
but it's just like unless you're doing the ash heap, that might work. I'm thinking of cooking these things on a grill over either charcoal, lump charcoal, by the way. I don't know if I mentioned that. I don't like the briquettes. They smell like the adhesive or whatever it is. They smell weird. They smell like pine. They smell like coniferous wood, cabinet wood or something. But lump charcoal, hardwood lump charcoal is what you want. And cooking it over a grill over lump charcoal. So that's kind of the method. But first, simmer them for, depending on the size, if it's a nice good sized beet, like 20 minutes. Simmer it with, I like acidulated water, a little bit of vinegar and salt. Simmer it for 20 minutes.
Right. The vinegar really does help.
Yeah. If you have potatoes of a normal size, simmer them all together, but pull the potatoes out at more like 15 minutes, or 10. You can be the judge, big old beets like that, like almost baseball size or larger. Those are solid 20 minutes, if not more. That can kind of be your guide. And then, again, take them out of the water, olive oil, salt all around, and then right on the grill. And let them go for a good long time, turning them when one side basically blackens.
Okay.
So
you just turn it once, kind of?
No,
I'm turning it lots.
The general rule, too, when you're roasting anything is don't touch it, the least amount possible.
Right.
But I don't know. There's some forgiveness there. You don't have to be
with the vegetables, at least,
puritanical about it.
Yeah.
Vegetables are pretty flexible, and you'll see they brown nice and quick, and it's okay if they get blackened on the outside. It's wonderful, in fact. And then when they're done, you take them off the stove and you smush them.
Right.
Put a nice solid spatula on them and with your hand, just smush them down so they flatten. And now you have all these squished potatoes. And then hit them with olive oil and salt again, and serve them up. And they're incredibly delicious.
Well, it's great to do that smushing stage because then when you cut it, you've got all the flavor spectrum in one bite.
Yeah,
you've
right.
got the charred and the mashed potato.
Yeah.
Kind of consistency.
Yeah.
And the salt and the oil. And,
Yeah.
It was so good when we did that the other night.
And there's really no vegetable I've found that doesn't do well grilling. Broccoli, cut broccoli heads in half longitudinally, if you know what I mean. Not perpendicular to the stalk, but parallel. And olive oil, salt, grill them on the lower heat side of your grill. give them grill marks. And it's okay, especially with vegetables, if there's some rareness in there. You know, that's just texture. It's wonderful.
Yeah, you're not cooking them to smithereens.
Rawness. Yeah.
My favorite are leeks. I love grilling leeks.
And leeks are pretty quick.
Yeah.
Leeks are easy to overcook because the thin layers on the outside they can burn like paper real quick.
Well, they're kind of nice though when they're a little like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a balance.
Yeah.
So when we were looking into some new apparatus for our outdoor kitchen that we're cooking up, we found a website that we wanted to share with you.
Yeah.
It's called heritagebackyard.com.
Yeah.
Which I love that name. When you told me, it's like, you know, converging to seemingly separate ideas.
Yeah.
Like 5-star restaurant on the farm.
Yeah.
It's just and that's the message they seem to convey at this website with their tools, their kit.
They have everything.
Oh, you want to get inspired to like redo your whole kitchen or add a second kitchen to your property? Look at this website because it will require some investment, but
it's cool. And I think that the main benefit of it is like they have pictures, which is nice.
Nice pictures
of all their stuff. And it is simple. So unlike me, I know many of you out there you have welders and plasma cutters and stuff. You could make this stuff.
It's true.
You could totally make it.
Yeah, we just don't do that kind of thing.
Yeah, I'm just completely useless in that way. But most of you aren't. And if you want some ideas as to what to make, you know, just check out their website and you'll see so much of it is very simple. The most tantalizing things to me are these fire tables, which is, it's so basic, but it's the basic stuff that really enables the most.
Yeah.
And they're just 24 inches high. 4 legs, you know, and they're huge. They're like 6 feet by 3 feet or something like that. And then they have fire brick on top. And you build the fire on top of that. And then on top of the fire, you can put, on the top of the fire table, you can put your choppas or your grills. And those are about a foot off of the table. And so that brings your cooking level up to 36 inches, which is really nice for grilling because it's just enough to be looking down without bending down to manage your grill. And you can arrange, you know, asadas or crosses, roasting crosses all the way around it. So but, you know, people can build that also. So that is a good source. And they have everything. They even have really nice ones that they have inserts that you can put in your house, which is kind of my fantasy, is I want a fire cooking inset. It's like a raised fireplace, a raised inglenook in my kitchen wall so that we can cook with fire in the kitchen.
Right.
A grill that can be raised up and down, a spit, and then a cage for just the fire and the ember generation for creating the embers. So that's Heritage Backyard. Right. There's also American Meatsmith. Is that the name? Sorry, I forget it. Jorgen.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, he has a website, and you just contact him. He's in the San Francisco Bay Area. And I believe that's what it's called. But
we're going to look it up real quick for you. We can put a link to it in the show notes, the exact website.
Yeah, and he is, AmericanMeatsmith.com, tool and supply company. AmericanMeatsmith.com.
Yeah.
He can just make this stuff, you know, and I think his stuff it's to order.
It's very custom.
But he does have a kind of a standard roasting cross and fire pit and spit design that all of which I have seen and used, and they're awesome. So
the other fun thing that we can share, maybe for your inspiration purposes, is the documentary that we watched maybe a year or two ago.
Oh, yeah.
Called Todo sobre el asado.
That's it.
And I think it's on Netflix for free.
It is. It's a really quirky, fun look at Argentines.
Oh, gosh.
And their culture. It's so hilarious. My gosh.
There's some laugh out loud moments.
Really?
Yeah. Kind of like hanging on the awkward moment kind of
big time
points. Yeah.
But it's all about the barbecuing. And it's it's cool. It's just a tour of the meat eating culture of the Argentinian people, but on every level.
But it's beautiful.
From the pros all the way to just, people in their kitchen every weekend or something. They do an asado and they do a little barbecue.
Yeah.
All levels of society, and it's really fun.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the whole point of it really displays something that maybe we want to communicate, which is cooking with fire really levels the playing field. There really is no like professional and amateur. You can cook just superbly if you just have a few little principles in your hip pocket when you're cooking with fire.
Yeah, and it's a funny thing because I've noticed that being able to cook with wood fire is not the same as being a good pit master barbecuer.
Right.
At all.
There you go.
And I happen to know this because I have cooked more with wood than I have with store-bought charcoal in my lifetime. And it actually takes more focus and energy for me to cook with charcoal because there's actually a little more, there's a little more know-how. You want to wait till it's ashen. You're a little bit limited by your apparatus. And so I remember, several occasions, like, I can roast a whole pig over Madrone. Like, why am I having a hard time with this charcoal right now in my Weber?
Burgers,
Yeah. They're not the same skill. It's a unique thing to be able to really execute a wood fire cooking experience.
Yeah. Excuse me. Well, I think that kind of wraps up everything that I had on the docket for today. I think that really gives people a good introduction on how to go for cooking something up really something that will wow people, but also give them that comfort food at the same time.
I think I'm thinking of a few practical things I want to postscript.
Okay.
End with.
Okay.
One of them is if you happen to bring a thermometer, which you don't need and probably shouldn't bring. The meat, when you have cooked it properly, the thermometer will read that it's way overdone, it's way overcooked. It's going to be blazing crazy hot. It's like if you put a thermometer in your Dutch oven in the meat in your after a 6-hour braise. Like it's going to be crazy hot, but it's not going to be dry and tough and overcooked, right? But it's going to be way over 160. Okay. Crazy hot.
Yeah.
I don't know. That might be helpful to know. You're going for pulled pork, which is hot. It's not rare, but it's not well done. It's still juicy, tender, fall apart. Perfect. There's that. And then there was something else. Oh, darn it. Come on, brain.
Well, you think about it. I've got one other thing I can say, and that is if you want a couple more resources, one more reason to become a member is Inside Membership. We've got a couple films, actually one for sure that's on barbecuing, and you also did a 22-page document on this topic.
Whoa.
And it's one of our Butcher Salt e-chapters. It's called The Journal, and it 90% of it is about your experience taking a pig and roasting it. And you did it a handful of years ago during our one of our Kickstarter things. And that was one of the rewards is you journaled for a month straight.
Oh, that's right.
And you documented how you did this whole pig, and it's step by step by step. And it was really beautifully written, I think. And so that's a really fun document to read, and that's Inside Membership. So one of the many great resources, but I think I can help set you up to feel confident in your barbecuing prowess. Yeah. So consider that as one more reason why you should become a member. August 3rd, we're going to be opening up membership, and only for a week, a week and a half, maybe at the most. So get in while you can. We're not going to open it up again until late fall. And that's really going to give us the jump start we need to getting our digital empire up and running and flowing full tilt boogie. So please consider becoming a member or a patron at whatever level you are able to give, and help us get this off the ground. It's going to be fun having you on our team. So
Okay, I remembered some things.
Okay, good.
All right, so I've never done pit roasting, like literally.
Yes, I'm glad I've thought of that too.
Digging a hole.
Yes.
You build a
Yeah.
huge fire,
Uh-huh.
like crazy big fire, and then you throw a bunch of rocks in there, and then you throw a little bit of dirt, and then you wrap your carcass in something like a bed sheet, and then you put it really, or whatever it is, and then you put the carcass down in there, and then more hot rocks on top, and then dirt, and cover the whole thing, and then go away. I've never done that, and that sounds cool, and I'm sure it's totally awesome. It would be tricky. It's an act of faith, because you can't fix things with that. That's like you commit it once and then you go, and there's no reactive recovery from any mistakes that you might make. It's just done and done right at the beginning. And I would also say size is an important consideration of the animal that some people, for some reason, they overlook. Like they see a big pig, like a 300-pound pig, that'll hang at around 220 pounds, or even just a 200-pound hanging weight. And they'll be like, yeah, let's roast that pig. And I think, like that makes me tired. That right there, I mean, if you're going to cook it all the way perfectly, that is at least cooking at fierce full speed, just a fraction below browning it right away the whole time, which is a very intense endeavor for at least 15 hours, a pig that size. And so frequently what happens is just the exterior of the pig is cooked.
Yeah.
And
that happens for both when you have a big pig and if you're trying the underground method.
Yes, yeah. People know how to do the underground method.
Yeah.
I say get in touch with those ones.
Yes, get in touch with an expert who grew up doing that in their Samoan grandfather's backyard.
Do it.
Like, that's the way to do it.
Yeah. So I like, for me, when I go to roast a pig, again, I like the lean ones. So I try to avoid the coonies and fat American guinea hogs, because while they may be the right size by the scale, they're 2/3 fat. So again, you're melting that fat to even begin to cook the meat. And then if I do find the lean pig, right around 80 to 100 pounds, is just perfect.
That's the other thing too, is pigs are deceptive in how much they yield. You can look at a little pig and you go, that's a little pig, but it can feed like 50 people.
Yeah.
Really easily.
They have a much higher meat to bone ratio than ruminants, than a lamb.
Yeah.
So err on the side, especially your first few times, on being too small. You're going to be fine. Like most of the time you're going to have leftovers. I promise you almost that is what's going to happen. So you're going to have leftovers. So a smaller pig, just err on the side of a little smaller.
Yeah.
I did a wedding once and I felt like the pig might be a little small because I think there were some last changes to the quantity of guests that were going to be there, actually, kind of last minute.
That's
and,
right.
When I'm roasting a pig for an event, we source that thing way before, because there's lots of things that need to be right about it. Like, one, I can get there. It's not a million miles away, and it's one that I can slaughter. I'm not going to buy something from a restaurant supply store. And it's the right age, and it's raised well. So there's so we'll book it way in advance. But the last minute change to the guest list meant that I didn't think that the pig was going to be enough. And so I stuffed it with rabbits.
That's right.
And that was awesome. I was able to bulk it out a little bit. But that took even more conscientious effort to think about cooking this from the center outward. Even though you're applying heat to the outside, your goal is, I want to heat up this core. That's what you're trying to do the whole time, and then radiate outward from the core.
Yeah.
And the last thing that happens is, incidentally, is the browning. So smaller, leaner pigs are the way to go. Around 80 pounds hanging weight. And then the other thing I would say, I really like for ruminants, lamb or goat. With goat, you don't have to worry about leanness. That's a given. Goats are just lean animals. Sheep can be quite fat. And I like around 30 pounds hanging weight for those.
Okay.
And again, these are all rough because fuel, the direction of the wind, everything is a variable that affects this. But with a 30-pound lamb, if I'm cooking at like kind of full speed, just a few degrees below browning the outside the whole time, if you know what I mean. So just slow enough to be pull apart tender on the inside and not brown it, but fast enough to be as fast as possible. That's like 8 hours, maybe 6 at a 30 pound. And 30 pound carcass is perfect. That's just great on my cross. And that's just because I've kind of refined my method. I think before, I would give myself much more time than that. For a 30 pound carcass, I would give myself at least 12 hours.
Okay.
Just to put plenty of forgiveness at either end.
Yeah.
Because again, the rest can be really long at the end of roasting. Really long before the meat even gets close to being unpleasantly cool.
Yeah. Or like sometimes a chaotic thing can happen in the beginning of the day. Like one time you showed up to the Divine Mercy roast and it was pouring rain on you.
Right.
And you almost walked away, but thank goodness we had a friend there who was really...
He's ready to go.
He was.
It's like rain? What rain?
He was pumped, yeah. So he set up the tents and like maneuvered these steel grates to just cover the fire perfectly, but it set you behind like an hour or two.
Took a while to get that fire going.
So anyway, give yourself time.
Yeah.
Low and slow.
Do.
Make the meat fall off the bone.
Yeah.
Invite lots of people.
That's awesome. It's the ultimate gesture of a feast.
It is. There's something very just human and, like we said, angelic at the same time about it.
Yeah, it's carnal and it's refined. I don't know how that works.
I know.
But it is. It's like the closest thing to just eating meat raw off of a carcass lying on the ground.
Yeah.
But then it also has the capacity to be incredibly refined and delicious.
Yeah, and what it does to a crowd too is it makes them feel more it makes us identify with both our animalistic nature and this rising above it all because we're together, where it unifies people. It has this ability to bring people together. And
it's almost like a microcosm of cultural evolution or something.
Right.
It's like you start with just the carcass. You're from just gnawing raw meat off of a bone or meat held on a stick over a fire. And then you actually journey through human history to culture, which I mean, I don't know any better distillation of culture than culinary preparation. Like the
how we
extent we go to make things not just palatable, chewable, and metabolizable, but like superfluously delicious, just way over the top. And roasting an animal it encapsulates that whole thing from, just clawing it off of bones all the way to a Michelin star experience, completely, utterly refined with pairing things and a profoundly delicious event.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much again for coming with us on this journey. If you are ready to step into the unknown with us and venture into a little bit of digital education to reach people that have not even heard of Meatsmith before yet, please consider becoming a patron and maybe even a member. And keep in touch with us with your questions. If you go on Patreon and become a patron, we want your questions as little rewards. Send us your questions. We'll talk about them on this podcast.
Yeah, they're fuels for the podcast.
Yeah, we will. We'll I think one of the rewards for most people is we're going to burn people's names into this into the wood siding of our butcher shop, and then we're going to film that, and they're going to be like, it's going to be on the end of our films.
Oh, like the credits.
Yeah, the credits, exactly. So we're really going to bring you inside these doors and do something great. So thanks again for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode. Bye.